Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. Today is September 9th, 2021. This is our 69th episode. My name is Andy Z, and we are coming to you from Los Angeles, California.
And my name is Sansara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the RNL show. And in today's episode, we have two big topics dealing with two very big eruptions of fault lines in the world today. The first is we're going to look at the 20-year anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center. And this is coinciding with the humiliating defeat of the United States in its 20-year war of aggression, its unjust war against the people of Afghanistan. So we're going to look at this, important points of orientation and how to approach this and lessons in this time. After that, we're going to zero in on what is really the greatest, most woman-hating attack on abortion rights that we have seen in this country in nearly 50 years. The Texas abortion ban, which really is a nightmare for women there and a harbinger, a foreshadowing of what's in store for women across this country if there is not a massive outpouring of struggle against this and fundamentally a revolution.
You know, both of these things are really highlighting what kind of time this is, and we've been promoting on this show. We've been going in deeply into a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution, because revolution is now possible to start getting organized for, because, both of these topics that we're getting into today, Sansara, actually illustrate that. The tremendous divide in this society between the fascist Republican Party and this huge social base that is supporting this Trumpism, this Trump form of fascism, who are, behind what is happening in Texas, and this law, which is actually an advance of fascism. It's an advance in that is basically a slave catcher law applied to those who provide this essential procedure for women to be able to be full human beings. And part of the reason that this is a rare time when revolution is becoming possible, where if we organize and bring people forward, it would be possible, has to do with this tremendous divide in the society that it can't be put back together again. And then with the defeat of the U.S. in Afghanistan, this is something that, while the Taliban itself, who's now taken power once again in Afghanistan, is a force of reaction, and we're going to mean a horror for the people of Afghanistan. This is the defeat of the U.S. is welcome in the sense that this is a weakening of this power that's had its boot on the neck of the people of the world. So for both of these reasons, this show has a lot of importance, and it will heighten, and we'll be getting into what we have to make an actual revolution.
And, I want to just take one moment on this question of an actual revolution, because people use that word all kinds of different ways. Last week, we had an excellent segment from Bob Avakian getting into what is a system, what is capitalism, and why it needs to actually be overthrown. People should go back and watch it. By revolution, we mean the actual overthrow of this system of capitalism, imperialism, replacing it with a radically different system, a new economic system, a new social system, new legal system, a whole different set of social relations and culture, the ways that people treat each other and relate to the people of the world and the planet itself. That's what we're fighting for. And people tell us, they say, okay, that sounds unrealistic. So I wanted to help open the show today with this quote from Basics from Bob Avakian, which is Basics 3:2. He says, "There is nothing more unrealistic than the idea of reforming this system into something that would come anywhere near being in the interest of the great majority of people and ultimately of humanity as a whole." And that's what you see in Afghanistan, that's what you see in Texas, and you see it all over the place with the burning of the planet and so many other outrages.
I'm glad you read that quote. Bob Avakian comes out of the 1960s, and he's never given up on the need for and the possibility of revolution. He's never given up on the people in this country and the people of the world to be able to make revolution when so many others have turned their back on it. And that's, for just one reason why we here at the show follow Bob Avakian and think that you should too. Not just think it, but we're going to struggle with you to follow Bob Avakian, because the world as it is now is not only intolerable, but it's unnecessary, because there is a far better way the world could be. But look, this is not the same time as the 1960s and 1930s, the time of Marx, the time of the Russian Revolution. This is this time. And Bob Avakian's gone really deeply into developing the science of communism, and he's made a breakthrough to put it on a more scientific footing, and that's opened up a whole way to know and change the world. He's worked on developing answers to questions that most people haven't even thought of. How do you actually overcome all these forms of oppression? How do you enable people to breathe in a new society and at the same time struggle with them to continue that revolution? We're not going to get into all of that right now because we have a lot in the show. But I just want to say to you, there's never been a leader like this in this country, a revolutionary leader like this. And there's no other leader like this in the world. And on both these questions, on the fascist danger in this country, the centrality of the liberation of women to the emancipation of all humanity, the necessity and the basis for people of the world to overcome an imperialist system, all of this, the work of Bob Avakian is path-breaking. So maybe we should just get right into the rest of the show.
Yeah, so with that, let's go to our first segment on the 20-year anniversary of 9/11.
In just 2 days from the first streaming of this show on September 11th, 2021, it will be 20 years since the fanatical Islamic fundamentalists representing the Al-Qaeda organization hijacked 4 airplanes and flew 2 of them into the World Trade Center in New York City, a massive 110-story office complex. The center was destroyed and nearly 3,000 people were killed. They also attacked the Pentagon, headquarters of the U.S. military. In response to this, the Republican President George W. Bush declared war against the government of Afghanistan, which had allowed Al-Qaeda to stay in their country. The Afghanistan government was headed by another fanatical Islamic fundamentalist group, the Taliban, who ruled a highly repressive, theocratic state in which women were brutally oppressed, practically erased from public life, and denied education. Now, this same Taliban, after 20 years of U.S. war and occupation, has returned to power with all the horror that this will bring to the people of Afghanistan. Thus far, the 20-year commemorations of September 11th have been relatively muted, focusing on the lives of people here. I suspect that this has to do with the humiliating defeat that the U.S. suffered after 2 decades of throwing its enormous military arsenal at one of the poorest countries on the face of the earth. And I suspect that on this September 11th, Biden will likely attempt to fog and poison minds here by praising America's supposed noble and righteous intentions, doing damage control on their defeat. The attack on the World Trade Center in New York shocked this country and the world. Images of planes flying into the towers and then this Twin Towers symbol of U.S. financial might collapsing into dust. The invincibility of the U.S. was shattered. The U.S. rulers could not let this stand, and President Bush stood in the rubble with an American flag and announced their misnamed War on Terror. Unleashing bloodlust and the ugliest revenge, this fascistic direction of huge sections of the U.S. society was now put on steroids. The black eye that the attack gave to the United States was answered with massive retribution, gangster, mafia style, invasion, bombing, occupation stretching from Africa to South Asia, with the main battlefield, the Mideast. Already with this 20-year commemoration of 9/11, September 11th, the media, including progressive media, are focusing on what this has meant to American lives, taking new generations back to the grief of those days when New York City was covered in dust and pictures of the missing from the World Trade Center were hanging in Union Square as thousands of people gathered day after day. And 3 days after the planes attacked, the Revcoms issued a statement that said this to the people here and around the world, quote, "Through the shock, we seek the truth. Global exploiters and mass murderers have no right to retribution, and they can only bring more destruction and injustice. To join forces with them, to seek their protection will only encourage them to commit more crimes against the people of our planet. And that is what happened. And then artists soon gathered in Union Square and Times Square with signs that said, quote, "Our grief is not a cry for war." And in 2002, Bob Avakian gave a talk in which he identified the new situation as, quote, "a cauldron of contradictions with the potential for great destruction as well as great upheaval, with the further potential for a situation where great advances could be made for revolution." He analyzed the new, bigger challenges, the new necessity facing the rulers of the United States empire and their need to dominate strategic parts of the world like the Middle East. The war against Afghanistan was followed soon after by the completely illegitimate, unjustified, and immoral invasion of Iraq by the US. These wars were carried forward, as I said on this show last week, leading to the loss of over 1 million lives. And today, in this brief commentary, I'm not going to speak of the whole of this and all its implications. But as people here in this country are likely going to be saturated with all manner of bullshit about how the war on terror was a just war and how its American warriors were heroes, I and we want to briefly bring out some of the truth of what this war really was. We're going to begin with some irreverence.
My name is Borat, I come from Kazakhstan. Can I say first, we support your war of terror. May we show our support to our boys in Iraq. May USA kill every single terrorist. George Bush drink the blood of every single man, woman, and child of Iraq. May you destroy their country so that for the next 1,000 years, not even a single lizard will survive in their desert. To show our friendship, I now will sing our Kazakh national anthem to the tune of your national anthem. Please stand. Kazakhstan is the greatest country in the world. All other countries are run by little girls. Kazakhstan is #1 exporter of potassium. Other Central Asian countries have inferior potassium. Kazakhstan is the greatest country in the world. All other countries is the home of.
But it is not just these fascist America firsters at this rodeo who hysterically fall at first for Borat's pro-U.S. pitch and then recoil at the thought that U.S. is not really #1, who are infected with American chauvinism. We face a situation where many people who want a just world are blind to reality because we have not yet disabused them of the notion, the lie, that America is fundamentally a force for good in the world, the good guys. All the focus on American lies in the form of thank you for your service, honor the soldier, not the war, all the obsessive playing by all too many guys, and it's mainly guys, but not only, of the various Call of Duty video games, not to mention movies like American Sniper, as well as the anti-war movies that treat the tragedy of the American soldier while leaving the nature of the imperialist beast that uses them as cannon fodder relatively unscathed. A declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution, describing the system we live under, says plainly, quote, "The system of capitalism, imperialism destroys lives and crushes spirits. It is a source of endless horrors for the majority of people in this country and all around the world. And it is increasingly threatening the very existence of humanity. The military of this country is not carrying out an honorable service, and it is not some badass force that people should respect," end quote. This is important, first of all, because the defeat of the U.S. in Afghanistan with its echo of Vietnam points to the reality that the U.S. is not invincible and what its oppressive role in the world actually is. And too many of our youth respect and get into the U.S. military because they dig that it is so powerful. This statement from the Declaration is also aimed at disabusing them of such bullshit. Some who spend their youth with the joystick of the Call of Duty video game go on to sit in the CIA or a military base firing real drones at real people. Barack Obama put drone war on steroids. And as of 2020, there have been over 13,000 drone strikes on Afghanistan. In addition to the cost to lives and limbs, drones are instruments of terror. Imagine, on a clear day, a clear sky, you are being spied on, unaware, by a satellite. And then you hear a buzz, like a bee, and suddenly you are vaporized. No warning, such that every day terror stalks the land, while American warriors sit in their game chairs. No, America is not the good guys.
America's a terrorist, killing the natives of the land. Killing and stealing has always been America's master plan. To control the earth and everything on it, to divide and conquer is all they want. America is a terrorist. No one wants to admit. Pointing the finger at others is the ironic part of it.
That was Abi O'Doon of The Last Poets, who are considered the forefathers of hip-hop, performing in a film, Stepping into the Future, which is a film of an event in Harlem, at Harlem Stage in 2011, that announced the book Basics from the Talk and Writings of Bob Avakian. On this anniversary of 9/11 that launched this war of terror for the interests of U.S. imperialism that has cost the people of the Middle East dearly millions of lives, I want to bring out an important synthesis from Bob Avakian on how to understand the dynamic in these wars in the Mideast and in other parts of the world. In an important talk in 2006, Bringing Forward Another Way, which concentrates what we must do in the face of this and what we are all about, Bob Avakian said this, quote, "What we see in contention here with jihad on the one hand and McWorld McCrusade on the other hand," and by McWorld McCrusade he means increasingly globalized Western imperialism, "are historically outmoded strata among colonized and oppressed humanity up against historically outmoded ruling strata of the imperialist system. These two reactionary poles reinforce each other, even while opposing each other. And if you side with either one of these outmodeds, you end up strengthening both." While this is a very important formulation and is crucial to understanding much of the dynamics driving things in the world in this period, at the same time, we do have to be clear about which of these historically outmodeds has done the greater damage and poses the greater threat to humanity. It is the historically outmoded ruling strata of the imperialist system, and in particular, the U.S. imperialists. This is now in the book Basics, Basics 128. To illustrate this, and to reveal that Abi O'Doon's refrain, "America is a terrorist," is not just rhetoric, listen to this exposure from Bob Avakian in his 2017 talk and film, "The Trump-Pence Regime Must Go."
The U.S. government wages war in Africa and Asia as well as the Middle East, claiming it is fighting to defend civilization against the brutal and murderous Islamic fundamentalist jihadists. But the imperialists of the U.S. are certainly no less brutal and murderous. And the civilization they boast of is literally built on the blood and bones of people all over the world. And why is this Islamic fundamentalism such a force now? fundamentally because of the workings of capitalist imperialism itself. Besides the overall role of imperialism in creating more favorable soil for these Islamic fundamentalists, actions of the U.S. imperialists have further fed their growth. In the 1980s, the U.S. actually armed and built up Osama bin Laden and other Islamic fundamentalists to strike at the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. In 2003, in violation of international law, the U.S. invaded Iraq to overthrow the head of government there, Saddam Hussein. This invasion was carried out under the cover of lies that Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. This invasion and the occupation of Iraq by American forces that followed caused hundreds of thousands of deaths, set off bloody conflicts among the Iraqi people, and created more fertile ground for Islamic fundamentalist forces. And the same thing happened in Libya. Under the presidency of Barack Obama, and with the insistent urging of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the U.S. intervened in a conflict within Libya on the side of forces opposed to the longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. With the fall of Gaddafi, which was brought about mainly as a result of massive bombing of his forces by the U.S. and its allies, the rivalries and conflicts within Libya were intensified and Islamic fundamentalist forces gained strength. Or take the case of Iran. In 1953, the CIA engineered a coup that overthrew a popular government that was moving to nationalize the oil of the country so that it could be used for the development of its economy instead of being controlled and plundered by the U.S. and Britain. This coup brought the Shah of Iran to power, and the people of Iran suffered decades of torment and torture at the hands of the Shah and his secret police. And here again, these actions of the U.S. created more favorable ground for the forces of Islamic fundamentalism, which ultimately seized power through the revolution that overthrew the Shah in 1979. These are only a few examples of the American crimes that have been committed and the kinds of consequences that have followed from these crimes in countries all over the world. And all this underlines the crucial importance of casting off the blinders of the great tautological fallacy and breaking with American chauvinism. We need to think about humanity first and above all.
The 20th anniversary of September 11th occurs in what has developed into a rare time when revolution could really be possible. If we struggle like hell with masses of people to see that out of the horrors of today, with the dangerous potential for even worse to come, that there is also the potential for something really positive, a real revolution for a radically new and far better society. The other side of the horror of the images of the carnage from drone strikes, the infuriating pictures of women forced back into the burqa, is that there is a way out of this world of backward oppression and destruction, a breakthrough in the science of communism, a breakthrough in how to know and change the world that holds the potential for the emancipation of all of humanity, a strategic approach to revolution that is not locked in the past, but is for this time in history. And there is an inspiring vision and a concrete plan for a radically new society in the inspiring Constitution for a New Socialist Republic, written by Bob Avakian. In sum, in a time of great danger and out of great horror, there is also the potential for something far better. An inspiring example of this, and something that profoundly moved me and all of us here at the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, appeared on revcom.us this past week. It's a statement by a new group that is initiating a movement for the new communism in Afghanistan. And it begins with this, quote, "The JKNA, the Movement for the New Communism of Afghanistan, is an initiating core, a group of revolutionary communist men and women who cannot stand the ugliness and the crime of the present world. We have gathered to raise our voices to say first and foremost, no, this world is not fit for any human being, end quote. They write of why they are taking this up, saying, quote, Comrade Avakian and his method of scientific and enlightening analysis shows how, in the context of this global crisis, in the midst of this confusion and incoherence that pervades the entire body of the world capitalist system, there is the opportunity to create a new path, a path leading to communist revolution. The bankruptcy of all tried and tested alternatives is more obvious than ever before, end quote. I want to close this commentary on 9/11 and the U.S. war of terror with this from Bob Avakian, also now in Basics, number 3.8. The interests, objectives, and grand designs of the imperialists are not our interests. They are not the interests of the great majority of people in the U.S., nor of the overwhelming majority of people in the world as a whole. And the difficulties that the imperialists have gotten themselves into in pursuit of these interests must be seen and responded to, not from the point of view of the imperialists and their interests, but from the point of view of the great majority of humanity and the basic and urgent need of humanity for a different and better world, for another way.
Last week, the most extreme abortion ban in nearly 50 years went into effect, became law in the state of Texas. This ban blocks all abortions after approximately 6 weeks into pregnancy, long before most women even know they're pregnant. Immediately, the clinics in Texas had to begin turning women away. Here is just one report of one of these scenes. One young woman was a drug user, set to begin serving a 5-year prison sentence in a week. She already had 3 children at home. She did not want to deliver a baby in jail. She dropped to her knees on the cold tile floor in front of the clinic director, begging her to take her to perform her abortion. And yet that clinic was forced to turn her away. And every day there have been countless more women. This is a nightmare, and it is happening now. Worse yet, this law was given a green light by the Supreme Court to go into effect, in open violation of their own landmark 1973 decision, Roe v. Wade, which guaranteed women nationwide the right to abortion up until about 24 weeks into pregnancy. Worse still, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case out of Mississippi next month that is a direct challenge to their 1973 Roe v. Wade decision, which could completely upend or overturn altogether national protections for abortion rights. The mainstream women's movements have called for nationwide demonstrations in cities across this country on October 2nd for reproductive rights. As I wrote on revcom.us this week, the outrage of millions must be called forth and mobilized to stop this attack on abortion rights and everything it concentrates. A line must be drawn. This is what these marches should be, as large and as militant as they can be. We RevComs are organizing now to prepare for a real revolution, to emancipate all humanity, and as a crucial and driving part of that, to break all the chains that bind women. We will do everything we can to contribute to making October 2nd what it needs to be, as part of spreading and organizing people around a call, a declaration to get organized now for a real revolution. Again from my article. Everyone who remembers the dark days before Roe should be speaking and warning about what it meant. Students and young people need to be filling the streets, along with others from all ages, relentlessly, not just once symbolically, refusing to let this attack go down. This is why there needs to be real resistance and mass growing protest going into October 2nd and coming out of it. We should learn from the women of Mexico who took to the streets in mass actions over the last several years, and just this week, their Supreme Court decriminalized abortion nationally. As people are taking to the streets and preparing to make October 2nd as powerful as possible, once again from my article, quote, "At the same time, and even more importantly, people from every walk of life who are being jolted by this and the other shocks that are pulsing through society need to dig seriously into why a revolution is needed, what this revolution involves, and what kind of society it is aiming for. And people need to be organized now into this revolution. The RevComs need to be out everywhere we can, with sharp, compelling agitation, drawing forward and engaging blocks of people over both parts of this, the need for mass resistance now, and even more fundamentally and more importantly, getting people organized into this revolution. As part of this, we should be organizing to have a significant presence at these October 2nd marches that puts before the world that there is a way forward through an actual revolution that takes as one of its core elements the complete liberation of women as part of the emancipation of all humanity. Follow us at the RevComs on social media and go to our website, revcom.us, for plans as they are set. But even more than that, DM us and get involved now in fighting to make this happen. To understand what's behind this assault and why there is no middle ground, no way to reconcile or heal the divide between the fascists who are driving this assault on women's lives and those who believe that women are full human beings and should be treated as such, you need a scientific approach. This scientific approach is what Bob Avakian has been further developing and applying over decades. This week, RevCom.us ran an incredible series of quotes from his work analyzing this attack on abortion and what's behind it, which everybody should read and learn from. It is because of this scientific approach that BA has been warning about and calling for people to take on this attack and to see what it reveals in terms of both the necessity for, but also the possibility and basis to make a real revolution. And all this is why the RevComs under his leadership, including myself, have fought to take this attack on and to fight for abortion on demand and without apology. There is a heightened need and basis for millions to encounter and engage this work from BA right now as people are being shocked awake. To this end, we're going to share an excerpt of Bob Avakian's 2012 talk called BA Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less, the talk from which we take the title of our show, where he cuts to the heart of this assault on abortion rights, and he connects it to the larger conditions and all-around oppression of women and differently gendered people. After that, we'll share some excerpts of an interview that I did earlier this week on my radio show called We Only Want the World. It broadcasts in New York City and in DC on the Pacific stations there. The interview was with Dorinda Hancock and Kim Gibson, who are the lead clinic defenders at the only abortion clinic left in the state of Mississippi. And then finally, we're going to lift our sights to what difference revolutionary state power will make and why we are fighting to get state power and why you should be too. So with that, let's get started with this excerpt from Bob Avakian's speech from 2012, BA Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less.
And along with this, women are subjected to continual assaults on their right to abortion and even birth control. Don't let these people tell you, these so-called right-to-lifers, that the issue is the killing of innocent babies. The issue is the control over women exercised by forcing them to be mothers, whether or not they want to be at that time. Now, to have children, to raise children, can be a really beautiful experience if that's what you want to do and if you feel in a position to do it in the way that you feel that it should be done. But to have it forced on you is virtual enslavement. Not to even have the choice as to whether you will do that. And here's the key to how you know, or one key to how you know this is not about killing of innocent babies. Try to find one of these rabid anti-abortion groups that is also not opposed to birth control. You'll have a very hard time. They're all opposed to birth control because the issue is not the killing of innocent babies. It's the control and subordination of women who are regarded as getting all out of hand these days in this society. which is another reason why we have, or a contributing factor to why we have this vicious pornography. So the goal of these attacks on abortion and, yes, on birth control, the right to them, is to deny women the ability to determine something as basic as when or if they will have children and raise children or be part of raising them, forcing motherhood on them once again and enslaving them in that way. Along with all this, millions of women and girls, millions every year in this country alone, are raped, assaulted, battered, and abused, often by those who claim to be their intimate lovers, while the half of humanity that is female is everywhere treated as less than fully human. Once again, I think about the experience of black people in slavery. You know what one of the main terms the slave owners used to describe the slaves? Talking tools. Because this is how they regarded them, and this is how they were treated. They were put on the auction block to be sold, and their physical attributes were examined. Their teeth, if they were women, their reproductive potential, their body shapes, their ability to work hard, their musculature. All this was examined in the most degrading way. And you think of the same thing with women today, reduced to objects to be used by men, treated as brood animals to turn out babies, and as unthinking flesh to be consumed and plundered, with their bodies and body parts used to sell products, pimped out and beaten into submission, plundered to portray and promote sex as conquest and domination by men, instead of shared pleasure based on mutual affection and equality. All of this degrades and demeans not only the women who are directly subjected to the most extreme forms of this, but all women everywhere. What kind of system is this? And why should anyone accept that this is the best possible way the world could be? And those whose sexual orientation is different from and seen as posing a threat to the dominant gender and sex relations, lesbians and gays, bisexual and transgendered people, or those who are simply unsure about their sexuality and questioning it at a given time, are harassed, bullied, often bullied to the point of committing suicide, brutalized, and even murdered. And despite certain changes in law and government policy, the reality of LGBT people being discriminated against, insulted, and even assaulted continues as a marked feature of the culture and society, bound up with deep-seated structural relations of this whole system, closely connected to the patriarchy and male supremacy that oppress women.
Think of what difference it would make if millions understood what you just heard. Share that segment and talk about it with your friends and spread it online. Now, with that as context, we want to go to the interviews, some excerpts of the interviews I did with Durenda Hancock and Kim Gibson, the lead clinic defenders at the last abortion clinic in the state of Mississippi, which is already getting inundated with women calling from Texas, desperate to get abortions they cannot get in that state. It is also a case out of Mississippi, an abortion ban out of Mississippi that the Supreme Court will be considering next month that could upend or completely reshape abortion protections nationwide. So let's go to that now.
reason to murder your own child, my friends. There's never a reason to do this.
Thank you so much for your cooperation.
Right here, they're ripping babies apart in here. Not right this moment, but they will be later this morning. They'll poison your baby for money.
Can you describe what it is like at the doors of the Mississippi clinic?
Yeah, we have anywhere from 6 to 35 or 40 protesters on the sidewalk every morning that the clinic sees patients. The clinic only sees patients 3 days a week as a rule because our doctors have to fly in because of the terrorists on the sidewalk. OBGYNs in the state don't want to perform abortions here. So it's not unusual to see bullhorns, 1200 watt speakers that they set up. It's, you never know what to expect. One day you may have 6 people and no bullhorns. The next day you may have a huge crowd. And it's terrifying to the patients.
What do people who support abortion rights, who don't think women should be forced to have children against their will, what do they need to understand that you think most people don't understand?
I think what is most important is that, you've always been encouraged to write your congressperson. And, I'm sorry, but our congress people are the ones that the anti-choice movement has put there. You're just wasting your email. I'm not saying that in states that have, more of a Democrat, more of a liberal contingency in the Senate shouldn't do that, but it doesn't mean you're safe. I think that we have to understand that sitting around having all these strategy meetings of what we're going to do next. No, what we've got to do next is, occupy the Capitol. I think it's time that we put our boots on the ground, as you guys did with Stop Patriarchy back during the abortion rights freedom rides in 2013 and 2014. We've just got to tell people out there that, unfortunately, writing your congressperson and everything else isn't enough now. You have to be outside. You have to be on the ground. You have to be at your Capitol, at your legislators' offices. You have to be there in person and demanding that this all stop.
This is where that rubber hits the road. As far as Christian nationalism in America, abortion is where it is being enacted first. Once it's done here, because I think that's the easiest sell, they've made the false narrative, they've created the culture shift due to our silence and lack of good PR over 30 years. They have created this entire false narrative surrounding abortion and who should have it, who should not, and, all of these different things. And that's what people need to know is this is a mainly religious thing happening here. And they're outside these clinics. They're not good Christian people. They are absolutely not good Christian people. They are terrorizing everybody out there. But I always try and keep in mind how I've looked at all of it when I came outside of a clinic and saw how they are acting and how they are able to, how nothing is enforced. That's why, Merrick Garland today was talking about, well, the Justice Department's going to do something. Okay, you haven't done anything since 1994, I don't think, when you passed the FACE Act. You haven't enforced it, that's dang sure. So, there are things happening outside these clinics that people just could not even fathom.
Any overall comments you want to share before we wrap up, including looking next month when the Supreme Court hears this case coming out of Mississippi, a 15-week abortion ban? What do you think people need to know across the country?
I just want people to understand that are saying they're in, New York or California, and they've worked to protect rights there in the 37 states that they're going to knock out first. Then they're coming after the safe states, and they're not going to quit until there is no abortion nationwide. So just because you're in California doesn't mean you don't need to be out here fighting right beside us. And I just want to remind everybody that we're the poorest state in the nation here. Women can barely afford to get to Jackson. Some can't. We're the only clinic in the state. All these people saying, you can come to Illinois, we'll help you. You can come to, are you not paying attention? They can't get 2 hours from their home in Greenwood to Jackson. How in the heck are they going to afford to get to New York? So please remember that when you're saying you can come here. Thank you so far.
You know, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting something new and different to happen. And at this juncture, even with this extreme thing happening, truth be told, I'm not seeing anything different happening. And it goes to a lot of things, but in this, and you would very well know, in this country, we have lost the concept of solidarity. We have lost the concept of massive uprising in a way that's, you know, BLM this past year has been the closest we've come to doing something in a measure of solidarity. And still, I can't say that we've seen a whole lot of real change out of it. We have had some culture shift, but I'm just talking about, you know, we can talk about Mexico decriminalizing abortion today. And that's a serious thing because, for instance, in Mexico City, those women took a building over. They're still there. You know, I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
Is living this way all that is possible? No. There's a whole different way society could be organized. A declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution, emphasizes that organizing people into this revolution requires getting people together in real life and online to grapple with why this revolution is needed, what this revolution involves, and what kind of society it is aiming to bring into being. So let's look at what revolution makes possible. The Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America, authored by Bob Avakian, envisions a whole different way society would be oriented and organized. A socialist state that would embody, institutionalize, and promote radically different relations and values among the people, with the final goal of the emancipation of all of humanity. A communist world. This is a big deal, and it provides a blueprint for a society that actually can be. Here's what the Constitution says in the preamble, right at the start, about the goals of this society, speaking specifically to the oppression of women. Quote, "The oppression of women arose together with the emergence of exploitive class divisions among human beings thousands of years ago. It has been carried forward and become deeply entrenched in all societies ruled by exploiting classes, and was a marked feature of the imperialist United States of America and its dominance and influence in the world. Abolishing and uprooting all of this is one of the most important objectives of the new socialist republic in North America." This is expressed not only in full legal equality between women and men, but beyond that, in the declared orientation and policy of this republic to overcome all traditions' chains embodied in traditional gender roles and divisions, and all oppressive relations bound up with this, in every sphere of society, and to enable women as fully as men to take part in and contribute to every aspect of the struggle to transform society and the world, in order to uproot and abolish all relations of oppression and exploitation and emancipate humanity as a whole. Nowhere else will you find a constitution that has this as one of its most important objectives. Nowhere. And right in the Constitution, as a fundamental orientation and a matter of law, in the Article 3, Section 3, called Eradicating the Oppression of Women, it states, "The struggle to finally and fully uproot the oppression of women is of profound importance and will be a decisive driving force in carrying forward the revolution to the final goal of communism and the eradication of all exploitation and oppression throughout the world. The Constitution also says straight up, the new socialist republic in North America gives the highest priority not only to establishing and giving practical effect to the full legal equality for women and to basic rights and liberties that are essential for the emancipation of women, such as reproductive freedom, including the right to abortion, as well as birth control, but also to the increasing and increasingly unfettered involvement of women equally with men in every sphere of society, and to propagating and popularizing the need for and the importance of uprooting and overcoming all remaining expressions and manifestations of patriarchy and male supremacy in the economic and social relations and in the realms of politics, ideology, and culture, and to promote the objective of fully emancipating women and the pivotal role of the struggle for this emancipation in the overall transformation of this society and the world as a whole. In simple language, the Constitution makes clear that women will have the laws and the full backing of the state to guarantee that it is up to them to decide for themselves if and when to have a child. Women will not be enslaved to their biology, and women who have sexual relations will not be turned into incubators for society. And all this is part of increasing the involvement of women equally with men in all spheres of society, uprooting and overcoming all manifestations and expressions of male supremacy and patriarchy, and abolishing for good all the thousands of years of traditions chains concentrated in traditional gender norms and sexual relations. Again, from the Constitution, this orientation and policies and laws flowing from it shall be applied, promoted, encouraged, and supported with the full political, legal, and moral force, authority, and influence of the government at all levels in the new socialist republic in North America. And this is just a taste of what is in this remarkable, visionary document. Get it and get into it. This is the kind of society we should not only want to live in, but should be aggressively, impatiently fighting to make real through organizing now for revolution, nothing less.
So before we close this, the 69th episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, we want to acknowledge that today through September 13th is the 50th anniversary of the heroic and inspiring Attica Prison Rebellion in upstate New York, where prisoners took over the prison and issued internationalist and inspiring demands, but then were brutally suppressed with the state police gunning down not only prisoners and humiliating and beating them, but also shooting their own guards who had been taken care of well by the prisoners. We're going to be doing a segment on this next week, so look for that. And with that...
And if you're in New York City, next Wednesday, September 15th at 7 p.m. up at Revolution Books in Harlem, there'll be an event commemorating this 50th anniversary of the Attica Prison Rebellion. The author Jared Reinmuth will present his graphic novel titled Big Black, Stand at Attica. It's a memoir of Frank Big Black Smith, who was one of the prisoners who rose up in 1971. And Jared interviewed him extensively before he passed away in 2004. And he tells this story in the graphic novel. So come up to Revolution Books if you're in New York City next Wednesday, September 15th. And wherever you are, tune in next week to learn more about the Attica Prison Rebellion and to stay connected with this movement for an actual revolution.
So with that, good night for myself and for the entire crew of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.